We now have our first glimpse into the October-November update for War Thunder this year, and I am pleasantly surprised because a lot of times these updates really aren't that interesting, and it's just kind of a filler update that they do. I don't even really understand why. But this time around, it's actually got some interesting stuff that I do want to cover, and everybody has done an F117 video by now. I'm sure all of you have seen many videos of that, so I may or may not cover that, but it is interesting. We're getting stealth this update, obviously a test bed for things like the F-22 and the F-35 in the future, still cool nonetheless. And there's even some cool features that aren't even anything to do with the vehicle that I do want to cover because I think that they are good changes, good quality of life changes for the game. But today we are looking at a vehicle, and this is the F-15I for Israel, which has like the ROM name or something like that. You might call it the RAM if you're an American like me, but this thing is kick-ass, let me tell you. It is an F-15E, so it's ground strike oriented. However, this is gonna be the best at, well, hold on. Mandatory, this is the dev server, everything's subject to change, blah, blah, blah. It never does change, so I'm pretty confident in saying that this is going to be the best F-15 in the game for air-to-air fighting as well. Even better than, obviously, the F-15C or the F-15J. If it does get changed in the future or before the update, that's probably overall a good thing. It's just me personally, my pattern recognition of Gaijin tells me that they're probably not going to change specifically what I want to talk about in this video. Obviously, the F-15E is a ground strike oriented plane, which we will touch on later, but for now I want to talk about air-to-air as I effortlessly dodged this Phoenix that I was flying straight towards the entire duration damn near of its flight. And that's because this thing is just ridiculously fast. It's not even funny. I rip my wings and die from overspeed in this thing as I'm just kinetically evading missiles more than I do enemy planes. The F-15I has upgraded engines over the F-15C that produce 2,000 more kilograms of thrust. It'll also be a heavier airframe due to reinforcement points for its ground capability and probably a heavier avionics and stuff of that nature, but 2,000 kilograms more force in each engine is absolutely bonkers. And trust me when I say that as long as you don't let the enemy within about 10-15 kilometers of you, you will literally never have to even drop chaff. Speaking of chaff, you get additional countermeasures on this plane over the F-15C. 240 normal countermeasures for the F-15 plus an additional 120 on this F-15I. I hope some of these clips illustrate the point that I am literally just full pulling on the elevator up here at 10,000 meters and not losing speed whatsoever, and I'm actually accelerating most of the time when I'm doing this. You can see me here sitting at Mach 2, 9,000 meters as I full pull the elevator to re-engage targets, slamming people out of the air with AMRAAMs, and they literally just can't touch me. There's nothing that these guys can do to even get close to me when I'm maintaining these speeds, pulling these kinds of maneuvers. This is honestly just so ridiculous that I would hope maybe Gaijin changes this. Out of all the things that they changed before they reached the live server, maybe this would be a good one to look into, but as I said, their history kind of makes me doubtful of that. Regardless, again, look at me accelerating even more as I full pull, accelerating into Mach 2.2 as I'm pulling AGs here, dodging incoming missiles, well, dodging, using that term loosely because really I'm just outrunning them and bleeding them of all their speed. As I said, unless they're launching from a similar altitude of like 10 to 15 kilometer range, honestly 15 is probably even pushing it when you're going Mach 2.2. I don't think that could even catch you. There's just nothing anybody can do. Realistically, in a full-size match where it's 16 versus 16, flying like this everywhere probably just isn't feasible, so I don't think this is exactly how it's going to play out on the live server, but for these smaller matches where everyone's kind of just isolated and you can kind of deal with people one at a time, it's pretty unbeatable right now. Just taking a guess based on when I got the RWR and saw the F-16 on my RWR, I'm gonna say he probably launched at me down there from about 10 kilometers and the missile never even came close. Granted, he is way below me. I'm 11,000 meters in the air, 11,000 meters plus Mach 2.24 speed as I'm turning around to engage him holding that elevator. That missile just was never gonna catch me. And so even if he fired one up at me right now, I genuinely believe that I could probably just turn direction once or twice as I continued flying towards him and his missile would have been toast. It just wasn't going to have the speed. Regardless, I get to HMD some AMRAAMs off at him. He's well within the no escape zone of these AMRAAMs with a 2.2 launch speed as well as my altitude. He's cooked. But unfortunately, he dies before my missiles will ever reach him. And from my short experience playing this thing on the dev server, as I said, the only time I really ever died is if I overspeed and rip my wings off, which is pretty easy to do when you're relying on your speed to just fly away from missiles, or if I'm just simply not paying attention to a target. He gets a little bit too close to me, I'm going too fast to get into a notch in time, and so essentially I just kind of eat shit. One last look with the F-15I, how I started playing this plane, which, by the way, was funny because notice these new afterburners and how they actually look pretty dang good. Thank you, Gaijin, for finally updating the afterburners. But a little while into playing, they just kind of like stopped showing up on my screen. I'm sure it's a visual bug. That's not going to make it to the live server, of course, I would hope, anyways. But when I did have afterburners on my screen, they do look very good, so thank you, Gaijin, for that. I started off by playing this plane with 2 bombs strapped to it, 2 2,000 pounders, and I just figured with the low player counts I'd be able to do a little bit of multi-roll, get a little bit more Silver Lions in RP, just because I would assume probably some of you guys out there would want to play it like this, and I wanted to see how feasible it was. And with these low player counts, I had no problems sticking to the air-to-air roll at the start of the game, and then when everything settled down, just go ahead and drop my bombs on a base to get a little bit of extra reward. These engines do not care that these bombs are on the plane. Sure, maybe if you're going to dogfight somebody, you wouldn't want them, but as far as just doing like the normal Fox 3 combat, they really don't make any difference whatsoever. So if you want to bring some bombs and try to get yourself a little base, with this current flight model, it's definitely doable. As far as the dogfight performance goes, as I said, I don't really know how it would affect in a dogfight, the flight performance of this plane. I haven't done any dogfight testing either, so I don't really know where this thing stands in a 1v1 situation, but for the typical 16 vs 16 Fox 3 combat, as I said, this flight model is absolutely bonkers and definitely would be my go-to if it comes to the game like this. Now let's touch a little bit on what the F-15E was designed to do. Ground strike, it carries a whole plethora of guided ordnance. You have GPS guided bombs, you have which are like JDAMs or whatever. You have small diameter bombs, which I believe are just mini JDAMs. You have those like glide bombs with wings, which I believe are also GPS guided. Excuse me if I'm getting this wrong. I don't really focus too much on ground strike capabilities. Of course, you still have your laser guided GBUs, a big list of them, and you have those like TV guided ones or whatever too. I think GBU 15s, GBU 8s, not really sure what those are called, but also an option with the F-15E. And lastly, you do not have to use CFTs, which is very nice for when you're going air to air. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see ya.